Hello, this is Chad Payne with Lens Software. In this video, a continuation of the RTX Development video series, we're going to look at managing your parameters, creating and managing parameters within your preference window. And by parameter, I mean the controls, the checkboxes, the list boxes, the color controls, the pen controls, a lot of different types of controls. We're going to keep it pretty simple in this video, but I'll give you the tools to create just about any type of control you need. And if you run into a situation where the control is not available, just shoot us an email, support@lenssoft.com, and we'll try to get that added to the library for you. So on the left, you see the simple interface we're going to talk about today. But on the right, you can see what's possible. This is the price volume pattern indicator that I developed. So you can see you can get pretty complicated, but you have complete control over the position of each control, the entries within each list box, and what elements are within a period control and so forth. So, and what happens when you check or uncheck a checkbox. So you can enable, disable, show, hide. So a lot of power and flexibility within the creation and management of control. So we're going to go through a few key functions that set up and update these parameters. So today we're going to keep using the XYZ demo sample C++ file that I have been using in all my videos to this point. And it's pretty simple. It has a list box for a period. It's just a simple moving average, so I can do 22 period and apply, and then I got a 22 period simple moving average. You can choose to draw lines or dots. So it enables and disables certain parameters. You'll see the dot has a width, so if I uncheck this, it unchecks the color and the width because those aren't used. You could hide them or you could disable them, either way. So we're going to show you how to do all that in a few different functions. So we have 6 controls in this simple RTX indicator, and they're reflected in this enumeration at the top. There's 6 enumerations, which is actually going to be 0 through 5, but that's 6 constant enumerations. The structure of user data has the data type for each parameter, and then down here it's also reflected in the parameters tokens. There's usually one character for each parameter. Sometimes there's more than one, and we'll get into those details as we move forward. I'm going to go ahead and move this setup function up here so we can see everything at one time and talk about everything. So everything you're seeing, this is the key to creating the parameters. You'll start with the user data. This will be the important structure. Okay, so I've got the first is the period. Now that's my list box of the period of the moving average. That's a short. So each parameter has a data type it's related to. Obviously a checkbox is a Boolean. Now what I'm going to do is create a table on the same page web page where you launch this video. I'm going to put a table there that tells you the data type, all the information for each parameter type. So I'll give you that information. I'll give you the data type, the single letter you'll need to use, and that short is reflected with a capital S in the parameter tokens. That's just a pound to find down here. So you'll need to match this, and with this, and with the setup function where you actually create them. Okay, so they are created in the same order they're listed here. And this enumeration at the top, which I've labeled my control enumeration, that allows me to identify the controls in the parameters update function, for instance, so I can enable or disable certain controls based on other controls like checkbox being changed or checked or unchecked. And we'll look at that in a minute. So it's important that your enumeration is in the same order as the structure and as the tokens and as the creation order within the setup function. That's a little bit complicated, but once you get the hang of it, it's a piece of cake. As you're adding functions, you'll add the parameter to the end here. Below this dot width, I would add a new parameter. I would add another entry to my enumeration with a unique name, and then I would add it to the parameters token, and then add the proper call to setup here. So let's go over these again. I've got a period, a short, a boolean to draw the line or not, a boolean to draw the dot or not, two color controls, and the color control data type is actually an unsigned long, okay? And then another short for the width of the dot. And down here you'll see short, B for boolean, U for unsigned long. The color control is stored as unsigned long, and short. So again, there are quite a few of these, and I'm going to give you a table that tells you all these details for each one. And down here you have different functions to call to set each parameter type up. Set period parameter, set boolean parameter, set color parameter. So we've used those three. You'll send in a label. Sometimes you don't want a label, and you can send it in without a label. There's an option for if we look at the definition of set period parameter, you'll see there's a flags short that you can send in as the last parameter. And here are the flags you can send in, and one of those is no label. So you can send that one in optionally if you want to suppress the label for that control and just show the control with no label. In this case, we've sent in a label of period. So our control has a label of period. It automatically appends the colon to it and puts it nice and tight just left of the control. So the other parameters to the set period parameter function, you have the default, so it defaults to a period of 13, and you colon separate or semicolon separate the values you want in the list. Okay, so you can see I have all the way through 100, and I skip from 40 to 50 to 100. And if we look at the list, you'll see the same thing, 40, 50, 100. And this last parameter is the width of the period control in pixels. And I've chosen 50 pixels. And that may relate to the size of the numbers that you're putting in the list to make sure there's room to show all of them. Now the next two are the booleans. They're very simple. You send in a label and then the default true or false. And then you can also send optionally the flag, like suppress a label. So that's the same here. We got draw dot boolean, and then we have the color parameter. We have a label, default color. Now in the RTXDK.h file, you'll be able to use some of these constant, this enumeration of colors, if you'd prefer to make it somewhat easier on you for the default colors. You'll always be able to go in and change those in the interface, but here's a lot of convenient enumeration for you to just enter. I could just grab this and enter this instead of for a color. Now I just, once I've created it and then I put it in my chart and then I change it to the colors that I like, I usually go in and break into the draw function and grab those hexadecimal numbers and just plug them in. So they're not necessarily any of the ones that are defined in the enumeration, but I'll just grab what I like and then I'll plug them back in. That's a nice little trick to use. And this is actually the width, but for color parameters, if you just send in a 0, it'll use a nice predefined width. I believe it's 82 pixels, but you can make it smaller if you wish. Maybe make it 20. If you're tight on space, you can make it 20 or 30 20 or 30 pixels. And then the flags. I've entered a flag append to the same line, which really in my case is ignored, because as you're going to see as we move forward, I'm going to move those controls around myself. I'm not going to rely on where they're placed by the setup function. I'm going to move them specifically to the X and Y coordinates within the window that I want. So that's really not relevant in my case. And then another period parameter. We've got the label, the default, which is 4, width of 4 for the width of the dot, and then the width of the control itself is 50 pixels. And if you go to RTXDK.h, the header file, you'll see all the different types of controls that you can create and the parameter list that you send in for each one. Again, I'm going to create a table that gives you most of these, if not all of these, and the type of parameter that's expected for each one. And you'll see at the end I call the parmsLoad function. I always do that here, and every time you load the preferences, this function is also called, and it positions the controls properly. So what I've done is just define X and Y and a Y step and an X base, and then I use those to position each control. And what this will place the actual control itself, and it kind of ignores the label. So if you're choosing to set parameter position control on the period, the first period, it's going to use this X position, the horizontal position, and actually place the control itself right here at that X position, and then put the label to its left. So each that function will specify the X and Y position of the control itself, and many of them, if they have a label, the label will be put to the left. But this is more convenient because you're generally trying to line up your controls and not your labels. The labels themselves will be flush right with each other if the control is flush left with each other. So those will line up nicely if you just line up your controls. So this is where we're using our enumeration that we looked at earlier. Let's go back up there, and this enumeration. So we can identify each of the parameters in order, and we don't have to position them in order at all, but we do need to position each one. Again, it does not have to be in order. So if you add a parameter late and you want to put it at the top, that's not a problem. Okay, so you just specify the parameter enumeration and then the X and Y position, and it puts it right there. And I've done that for each of the 6 controls in my window. Now the parmsUpdt function is called each time any parameter's value is changed by the user. So if a user checks a checkbox or unchecks a checkbox or changes the value within a control, this function is called, and it's sent in the parameter number, and it'll be the same enumeration that we just looked at. So you can do a switch on the parameter number. And if it's so in this case, this is the Boolean checkbox, draw a reference line, and I've got this function to check if it's checked, if it was just checked, or if it was just unchecked. Okay, so this will return true if it was just checked and false if it was just unchecked. So then you can enable other parameters based on the state of that checkbox. We've done the same thing for both of these essentially. This one enables and disables these 2 parameters. So you'll see here if I check or uncheck this, it enables and disables 2 parameters, and this one enables and disables this one color control. So that function is getting called each time we check this. And the last function we called is getting called each time we bring up these preferences. A single time, each time we load those preferences, the parmsLoad function will get called, and that's where you'll put your controls in their proper place. And down here at the bottom of the parmsLoad function, you'll notice that we called the parmsUpdt function. Now so when you're loading the parameters, you want to call parmsUpdt on these 2 controls so that it'll properly initialize the state, the enabled, disabled state, based on whether or not those checkboxes are checked when we load the preferences. So that's why we call those. Otherwise, it'll leave them all enabled. But if we have one of them unchecked in the preferences, then this call will will disable the related control. So I hope this video at least gave you a good primer on parameter creation and manipulation. We'll be adding many more different types of controls as we move forward through the different functions, and I will be getting into probably individual videos on some of these more complex parameters like signal. You can embed signals and custom indicators within your RTX indicator. Those are a little more complicated, so I'll probably do individual videos on some parameters, but we'll get through each of these, and again, you can reference that table below the video. That'll be very convenient for you. So if you have any questions on creating or managing parameters, please email support@listboxes.com. Thank you.